Hello everyone, my name is Benjamin Polides, and today I will be speaking on the body and how that relates to our position within the cosmic hierarchy. I'd like to start by reading a few texts from the Song of the Divine, that's translated from Bhagavad Gītā in Sanskrit. And so it takes place on a battlefield about 5,000 years ago between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Arjuna. And so Arjuna is curious to get the full compendium of Vedic knowledge bestowed to him by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so I'm going to start with reading a few texts from chapter 13, which is called Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. There are 18 chapters total, but we're going to be starting with just a few texts from chapter 13. Arjuna said, "O my dear Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the end of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. O scion of Bharata, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its owner is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are." So we can hear immediately that Krishna relates the body to a field of activities. Now, why is this relevant? Well, other than it being the absolute truth, recently in the physics community, a certain theory has been making its way, and that's Eric Weinstein's theory. I believe it's called the unified field theory. And everybody in the physics community, the Holy Grail is to find the theory of everything, so to speak. But it's actually already given to us in the Vedic literatures. So Eric Weinstein's theory is that we have called geometric unity theory. And it kind of usurps the standard model paradigm. So the standard model is to posit theories which are then verified by experiment. But his whole thing was to go below Einstein's quantum theory and to posit a totally different theory. Now, where he is correct is that in his theory, he says that there's a 14-dimensional auxiliary space. In the Vedic literatures, it's a little bit more comprehensive, we shall say, but in the Vedic literatures, which come back from time immemorial, which are known as Shastra, which is to say they are the living deity in literature form. So it is the absolute truth. And what the Shastras say is that there are 14 planetary systems. There's 7 higher, 7 lower. And the Earth plane is located at the 8th level. So it is the first of the 7 higher planetary systems. Now the Earth plane, it consists of both gross, so physical matter, and subtle matter, mind, intelligence, ego. As you go up in the higher planetary systems, it becomes more subtle until you reach Brahmaloka, which is the topmost of the 14 planetary systems. Now, as you go lower, it becomes more gross. And so then you get to like reptilian brain, so to speak, thinking as you go lower and lower. Now, there are planets that each have these different traits to them. And so you have the higher heavenly planets and you have the subterranean heavenly planets. So you have what is known as Nagas and other reptilian beings that exist on the lower planetary systems, the subterranean heavenly planetary systems. And then you have subtle beings, which are more like angels and divine beings that exist on the higher planetary systems. Now, there are 2 ways of looking at the hierarchy, so to speak, of the 14-dimensional space of the 14 planetary systems. Now, you can look at it in terms of linear in a gross material sense. So there's low and you go to high and it's one straight shot up 14 planetary systems. But the other way of looking at it is what's called a chiron. So it's a diptych. It's a mirrored image of each other. So you have 7 on one side, 7 on the other, just like your hands, right? Your hands, when you overlay them this way, they do not superimpose perfectly, but if you overlay them this way, they do. And so when we overlay the two planetary systems this way, they don't work perfectly. But if we look at them as a mirror of one another, then they do work perfectly. So you can look at them as 14 linear hierarchy space, or you can look at them as a 7 and 7. Just like as we have a bicameral mind, as they say, a two-sided half of our brain, so are the two planetary systems, the 7 higher and the 7 lower. And what is so awesome about this is the 14-dimensional space exactly mirrors our body, right? This is where it gets really just so amazing. I made this realization very recently. So you have the Earth planet, which is at the base, right? So that's us. And then you have Bhurvaloka, Svarloka, Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka. So these correspond to the 7 chakras within our body. Now, simultaneous to that, so that's on our left side of our body, right? Because the right brain is creative, it's more angelic, it's more subtle, it's more creative. So that governs the left half of our body. But then the right half of our body is more like the lizard brain, as people would say. And that's governed by, so the left brain governs the right side of the body. And so the 7 subterranean heavenly planets, or lower planetary systems, as they would say, they exist on the right side of the body. Again, so ancient Chinese medicine, some different modalities posit that the 14 are just linear, and they exist in your body, starting at the top and going all the way down to the bottom. So the lower planetary systems are represented like at the waist and below. But see, this is a gross materialist way of thinking. Whereas if we take the more Kubrickian approach, right? If you watch the movie The Shining, there's all these mirrors. The opening shot is of, I believe it's Glacier National Park, right? The lake with the tree, it's reflected perfectly. It's a mirror image of one another. And what's actually interesting about that movie is that the opening credits roll bottom to top, which is kind of confusing. Why would he have done that? Well, it's because the movie's meant to be mirrored over each other. And this is kind of how we are supposed to see the world in which we exist from a transcendental perspective. The spiritual world and the physical world are mirrored images of one another that are superimposed, so to speak, on top of each other. And so it's not right to say that there's a linear space or that there's a chiron space. It is actually both simultaneous. And this is what Einstein's, all the physicists are looking for, like the third space. This is the third space, is seeing them both simultaneous. It's the material and the spiritual superimposed on one another, simultaneous to each other. So the 14 dimensional auxiliary space that Eric Weinstein had talked about, it posits 4 objects within, so you have, we can look at it as a body, right? You have 2 arms, 2 legs. You have 4 degrees of freedom within those. You have 4 measurements within those. And then you have 6 protractors or angles, non-repeating angles between those. And those all together comprise the 14-dimensional auxiliary space. So right now, we are vibrating, so to speak, at a lower resonance. So we are only feeling a 4-dimensional auxiliary space, which is, look at the room, right? 3 dimensions and then a 4th dimension through time. But there is actually 14 dimensions happening simultaneous to this around us, or 14 dimensions altogether happening at all times. But we cannot see those right now, or feel those rather. And this is due to a lack of knowledge, and it's due to a lot of things, but it mainly is due to a disconnection from the absolute truth, who is the only one who is able to give us this knowledge. Krishna says later in the Bhagavad Gītā, I'm situated in the heart, and from me comes wisdom, knowledge, and forgetfulness. There's also, this can be proved scientifically, that there are tissues within your heart that mimic the tissues that are in your nervous system and in your brain. And so we know that there is a second brain within the heart, but that is actually known as the mind. It's the seat of the soul. It's the seat of the soul and the super soul. They sit next to one another. And so when we're suddenly hit with inspiration, where did that come from? That information was just beamed into me, right? That is the super soul within us giving us that information. It is the portal's opening up a little bit, the information's being given, then it closed. Because we're so covered over with so much programming that we recruit in this material space from birth, we are unable to feel and see the super soul within us. But as soon as we are able to dissolve that, then the portal stays open, and then the information just comes. It's a direct link between the soul and the super soul. There's nothing in between it, no programming to mediate that, right? So I wanted to just give kind of a basic understanding of the physical body in which we live in. And this is from my realization from studying Ayurveda. I was, before coming to the absolute truth and realizing these higher understandings, I was a top athlete. I had been to 2 NHL rookie camps. I had played Division I ice hockey. I graduated scholar athlete of Miami University. I was a filmmaker. I studied missing people. I studied life after death. I did a lot of mystic yoga. I actually had 2 heart attacks and 1 suicide attempt before the age of 30. So I would say I'm fairly well qualified to understand this from a life after death perspective, which is what we are all fearful of, because we know that at some point the clock is going to end for us and that we will have to leave this space. And so it's very important to understand what the afterlife holds for us so that we can live this life to the fullest degree without the fear and without the tension associated with, impending doom and death. Because as soon as we fear death, we become programmable, we become manipulatable, right? And then men of material mind can convince us that we are the body and that we need to keep this body alive by artificial means, when actually everything is provided to us in natural means. And that's the Ayurvedic perspective, is that everything on this planet that was put here is either a medicine or a poison, depending on the time, place, and circumstance. Everything has a medicinal purpose and everything has a poisonous effect as well. We can see this very simply when you give an antidepressant to a human versus a cat, right? You give it to a human and it makes them kind of zonked out and lethargic. You give it to a cat and it makes them very energetic and wily. Similarly, there's certain uses for cocaine in terms of it being a certain stimulant for the heart or whatnot, versus, it can be abused. So everything can be abused, but if it's used in its medicinal purpose, with under the supervision of somebody who knows what they're doing, then it becomes a medicine. But everything can be abused, everything can become addicted in this material space, addictive, habit forming. So if we better understand the body from the oldest perspective on the planet, then we can eventually transcend the body and live in it comfortably. Just as you would, a mechanic who knows a car is going to generally be a better driver and make it last longer than somebody who has no idea what their car does and just relies on, the mechanic shop to every once in a while do a tune-up. If we can hear what is going on in our body, if we can feel what is going on in our body, we will then be able to understand that we are actually not in control of our body. We desire something, and then it is sanctioned by a superior energy that is imbued into us. It is actually always flowing through us. We are just unconscious of it. So the best way, I think, to begin would be to explain the spectrum of energy upon which we exist. So there's gross energy, and there's subtle energy, and then there's gross material energy, subtle material energy, and then there's spiritual energy. And these exist kind of on a spectrum. So they start very dense and subtle, and then they start very dense and inert, and they become more subtle, fine, until you finally get to pure living consciousness. And so everything is energy, right? And so the dense energy, the densest of energy, is known as solidity or earth energy, right? And then next to that is water, liquidity. And that is the second most inert and dense energy. And then you get to fire or heat energy. And then you get to air energy, then etheric energy, then mind, intelligence, false ego, then Atma, super soul, then Atma, soul, and then Paramatma, which is super soul. And so these are the spectrum, right? This is the spectrum of energy. Now, in our constitutional position, programmed by the material energy, most of us do not feel the Atma, Paramatma, and few of us have a full conscious recollection of what our false ego is actually doing to us. Most of us are ruled by the false ego and directed willy-nilly by the mind. Now, in order to overcome that, we need to purify our intelligence. How do we do that? We dispel the intellect. So intellect is what you collect. Intelligence is what comes from within. So from a very young age, because we were born into a, for lack of a better term, a demoniac world, that is actually the actual term we should be using. But since we were born into a demoniac world, we're conditioned from a very early age, programmed to think a certain specific way. I, from a very young age, was programmed to believe that, money was the currency of love, and that, I had to strive to be the best at some field that was arbitrarily chosen, seemingly, by my father and mother at the time, right? So your whole life you work to overcome this programming put into you by parents who you think love you, right? That's an oversimplification, but we can understand where I'm going with this. Now, there's a lot of talk about the dissolving of the ego, right? And it's very common in New Age circles to say, oh yes, I've dispensed with my false ego. Well, right there, as soon as somebody says that, you know that they have a false ego still. Because you cannot dispense with your false ego. It's always there. It's actually another energy that we have to bridle, right? We have to keep at bay. And so what Bhaktisiddhanta said was that we should beat our false ego, beat our mind down with a shoe 100 times in the morning and with a broomstick 100 times in the evening. It's a constant endeavor. There is no, oh, I'm done with my false ego, it's over. No, it's a space. The second point I would like to make after the spectrum of energy is to understand how the energy came into being. So Prakriti and Purush, these are the two most primordial types of energy. You have the male and the feminine, right? The male living consciousness, and you have the enjoyer, and then you have the female, the creative energy, right? And these two meet, and through their intermingling, a conglomerate false ego is formed. And from that false ego, the Purush impregnates the living entities, and then they fall into material matter. So life comes from life. We are not born from inert matter, as is linearly understood, right? Fossilism, all this, that early man was less advanced than this is all complete nonsense. It is not true. We were not born from inert matter, right? We were born from living consciousness. What is the difference between a living body and a dead body? The consciousness and the individual in it, right? Your body is actually a zombie. Right? Your body is a piece of inert flesh. It is a corpse that's given life by consciousness. And you can see this when you walk into someone on the street, you can see people and you're like, man, they look like they're living in a dead body. But it's a fact. We're all living in a dead body. And somebody with an effulgent skin or a bright disposition, it's because they're living to the fullest extent, and then their life force is kind of pushing through the inert matter. And so we can see they're full of life. Now, in fact, everybody has the same minute spirit soul, and the same mind, supreme living being within them. Now, it's a matter of to what degree are they following their unique personality and their unique life path that God has given them versus trying to deviate and being the controller over all they survey. And the more we live in God's channel, the more that we will feel alive. And the more that we live according to our own desires, the more we will feel dead and inert. So somebody who is a spiritual master, their body is fully spiritualized. They look like they're glowing because there is no inertness in them. They are living fully in God's channel. Their chakras are totally lit up. They're wearing their crown, as it says in the Bible, Book of Revelation, on the top of their head, because their crown chakra is completely open, and it's like being plugged in to a spiritual outlet and just you're just buzzing with energy. I had this happen to me one time. It was very mystical. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I had taken a lot of mushrooms a week prior or so, and I was kind of having all these revelations very quickly, realizations. And I was doing intermittent fasting, and this was before I discovered any of this literature. And so it kind of propelled me above the clouds to see the top of the mountain. I was unprepared for it. I didn't understand what was happening, but it's like something beyond me was, pulling the strings. And so I felt like I was God in a sense. So I was with my significant other at the time, and I was fasting, and I suddenly felt this overwhelming sense of love start to emanate from my heart, right? And it felt directable. And so we were at lunch. It was at, I think, Manhattan Beach, California. And I just started directing this love to her from my heart to her heart. And then as we got up from lunch, we were walking, I put my arm around her, and it just felt like I was giving everything to her, just my heart to her heart, like that. And we walked through the town like that, and then we got down. Her family had a house kind of on the walk path right before the beach. And right as we got there, I suddenly felt like a cramp, like what they would describe as a heart attack, start to grip me. But I didn't fight it. So many people, they tense up when they heart attack, right? I didn't fight it. I just kept letting it happen. Whatever was happening was just going to happen. And I just kept pouring this love that I knew was coming into my heart, into her heart. And it got to the point where she said my hands turned purple, right? And they started to cramp like this. And I lost all motor function. And she had to hold me. She had to actually hold me like this. And then I could feel negative energy being pulled from her as positive energy. And then this negative energy, it was something very mystical, was coming into me, and I was screaming it out. Something like straight out of the Bible, right? Screaming it out. And then I could feel this energy moving up. So every time I would scream, it was like another higher, another higher, another higher. And I had known that I had demons within me, baby. There were a lot of demons within me at the time. And, but it felt like I was sacrificing. Like I was just fully surrendered in that moment. I had given my heart, my soul, everything. And whatever this possession was, the Holy Spirit, super soul coming into me, it was in control. I was not in control at all. And then I eventually went inside, and the screaming stopped right as her and her gardener had brought me in, their family's gardener, into the lower part of the house. And I was just screaming, and I could feel whatever was happening, I knew it was very cleansing. And then as soon as I gave out this last blood-curdling scream, totally terrifying, something just ripped out of me, nothing that we could see, but it was very clear something was leaving my body. And then as soon as that happened, it was as if a lightning bolt hit me on top of the head and just sustained this energy. And so I got up immediately and I said, we made it, we made it, we made it. But I was not in control of whatever was saying this through me. And it was as if the veil that we normally see was lifted for a minute. And I was saying, we made it, we made it, we made it. And I was totally ecstatic, and then whatever the super soul energy, Krishna's superior energy, then put me back down, and laid my head down. And I've never felt that way since. I mean, I felt ecstatic symptoms, but not to that degree. And everyone present was everybody knew we had just seen a miracle, made flesh. And how can you ever go back to a material life after something like that happens? Because you're totally convinced that you're not in control. You may desire things and you may have the illusion that you're in control, but ultimately you are not in control. There's a superior energy in control, and as soon as we surrender fully to it, then the veil is lifted and we can, fall into spiritual substance. And then it's totally blissful because it's just so ecstatic. So I wanted to share that. I've never shared that on camera before. I've shared it with a few people, but I think it's time that I start explaining to people who I am and why I was sent here and what my function is, my mission is. And my mission is to help others dissolve their fear of death. And because I no longer have a fear of death, it comes and goes, but as long as I stay in pure consciousness, then the fear of death is not there. And if my testimony can help save one person from the illusory prison house, then it was all worth it. And I should no longer hide behind false modesty, believing that I'm not equipped or I'm not ready. It's not my choice. It's not my story. It's Krishna's story that he's playing through me. I think it was Shakespeare, right, who said that we're all actors and all on a stage, right? It's true. It's true. He's the supreme director, and we're either conscious actors or we're unconscious actors. So by knowing the body, by studying the body, the chakras, health, science, all of this, I came to understand how we can purify the vessel. Fasting is always great, but it should be done in moderation. I was doing long-term fasting, 6-7 days, and that can be very detrimental to one's health. So I wouldn't recommend it. What's recommended in Vedic literature is what's known as Ekadashi fasting. So 2 days a month, you do anywhere between a 64-hour and 24-hour fast. Fasting sometimes means with fruit, sometimes means not. The best is to do nothing if you can bear it, because your body has a natural way of cleansing itself. It also increases telomere length, all these things. It's so beneficial. Your body is put into a state where it starts burning the toxins within itself. You have channels in your body. This is the Ayurvedic understanding, right? So what we think of as cholesterol and all of this stuff, yes. There's more toxic things you can put in your body that clog your channels. But there's ways to purify and clear the channels of the body. The Ayurvedic recommendation is to do what's known as a khichdi cleanse. Khichdi is a very easily digestible porridge made from mung bean and white basmati rice. Now, if you eat this khichdi and you do a strictly khichdi fast for as many days as you are overweight in pounds, you will see just amazing things happen. You will feel miracles happen within your body. That is not a joke. That is a fact. Khichdi cleanse is the best way to purify your vessel alongside chanting transcendental sound vibration. These two things, Chanting Vedic mantras, Khichdi cleanse. If you do these, you will feel God within your vessel in a very short amount of time. But the problem is that we're inundated with so much sense gratification that we fall down. We can't do it. We can't stick to it. We can't stick to the Khichdi cleanse. Because also while you're doing it, the issues that are stored in your tissues, your body's the most intricate storage device on the planet, the issues that come out that you've repressed down, they're like too much to handle. And so if you don't have a bona fide priest, spiritual master there to help you digest the karma, then you're inevitably going to fall down. But if we are fixed at the feet of our spiritual master, trying to serve him to the best of our ability, we're offering it back to him, not on our own strength, then the chances of success are increased exponentially. It's night and day difference, the difference between water mixed with limestone and milk. Milk is legitimate. Water mixed with limestone does nothing for you. So there's so much pollution in this world. There's so much pollution, right? And I'm talking what we take in through our eyes, through our cell phones, what we take in through our ears with all the crazy music. It's all sex energy, right? Most of it. And then you take in what we take in through our mouth, what we put on our skin. We have to be so careful about what we're putting in the temple of the Supreme Person that we are inhabiting. And as soon as we become 100% purified, it's just pure ecstasy. There's no other way to describe it. Because we are living with the Supreme Person whom all energies came from. Let's just think about that for a second, right? Energy is a spectrum, and it's infinite. There is no limit to the potency of the Supreme Person. And so we are experiencing a very small amount of inert energy, a 4-dimensional space. There are 14 dimensions of material space, and then there is spiritual space. And we're experiencing this much. And we're thinking that is enjoyment. I was a very, very accomplished sense gratifier, both for myself and for others when I was younger. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? This is how we're praised to think, is that eat, sleep, mate, defend, be merry. And that's it. But there's so much more. There's a treasure trove buried within ourselves that once we uncover all the dirt and grime that's on the mirror of our heart, he becomes manifest to us. And then within this state, we can relish in pastimes with him at the center. But until that point comes, we are trapped in a 4-dimensional space of our own creation because we desired it. We desired sex gratification, and so we fell down into this space. This is a space ruled by sex desire in the gross sense. The higher planetary systems, the higher, how does he say it? Dimensional auxiliary spaces, they are not ruled by gross sex desire. They're ruled by subtle sex desire, creative desire, things like that. They're channeling, it's kind of like a space where you can channel into creative space, right? So when somebody has a balanced right brain and left brain, and their chakras are fully lit up, they're not resonating at a lower chakra space, and therefore they're not desiring to please their gross senses. They're not desiring, to have an orgasm, to do that kind of thing. They're desiring to fulfill a creative impetus that they know exists within all created beings, to channel a superior energy and to put it forth and to give others enjoyment through that superior energy. because that gives enjoyment to the Supreme Person. The higher the energy resonance within our overall vessel, the more attractive we seem to other people. Until you cross a certain threshold, then you become repulsive. It's like an uncanny valley type situation. So as long as we're attractive in the material sense, you become attractive to succubuses, to vampiric energies that want to take from you. As soon as you cross over into spiritual space, you become repulsive to the materialists. And they will actually do everything in their power to suppress you. But if you're fully surrendered to the Supreme Lord, they cannot do anything because they blaspheme against God, who is actually situated within their own heart. And so the more that vitriol, that anger comes out of their vessel by just associating with somebody who's on the spiritual platform, it becomes digested because it's directed towards that person who's a representative of the Lord. And then they're able to help digest it. A spiritual master is not our material friend. They are our eternal well-wisher. A guru who's a sage on a stage and is telling you what you like to hear materially is not your friend. You're actually antithetical to being your true friend. They're not spiritual either. They may have manipulative ability to understand the finer elements of material energy, but that is not spiritual. Again, we're in a 4-dimensional space. We currently think we occupy a 4-dimensional space through our perception. There are 14 dimensions of material space alone that we do not perceive in full glory and bliss because we are trapped. But beyond that, there is spiritual space. So we are experiencing something very little. And these, so-called gurus, sages, shamans, whatever, they maybe have access to that subtle space, and then they trick people into thinking it's spiritual space. But it's not. It's not spiritual space. Spiritual space is surrendering to the highest authority. That's how you can stay in spiritual space. There is spirit underlying. Okay, here's another. It's so beautiful, right? The variegated diversity within this world we live in is so beautiful. If you can see it as an emanation from spiritual space. Physicists say there's a supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy, or Milky Way universe, whatever. They also say there is dark matter that comprises 3/4 or whatever of all of space that we can't access. What do you think those things are? Well, the supermassive black hole is Vaikuntha Loka. It's Goloka. It's Krishna's abode. It's the Supreme Personality of Godhead's abode. And because we think that material world is the highest, we don't have access to it. So it's reflected back to us as a dark, supermassive black hole. Similarly, the spiritual world, which is all around us right now, is dark matter, according to the materialists. They do not have the instruments to measure it. But what's so beautiful is we were given the instrument. It's right here. It's your body. This is real equality of outcome, not this nonsensical, social justice perspective that everybody deserves material equality. No. Who says, right? You have a body. You are given a vessel. It works properly if it's not polluted. So your duty is to make clean your vessel, and then you will experience happiness. It's not to surrender your vessel over to men of material mind and hope and pray that you'll just be happy. No, we don't surrender our intelligence. We purify our intelligence. This is the secret to being. So I want to stress this point again. Khichdi, mung bean, and white basmati rice. You can use spices, you can use vegetables, message me in the comments. I'll give you a recipe based off of my understanding. That coupled with chanting mantras. So in John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. In, I think it's Psalm 113, Romans 11:13, throughout the Bible, it says one should call on the name of God and they will be saved. Right? It says this consistently throughout all scriptures. It's because the Lord and his name are non-different. If you chant mantras, the highest mantra is the Hare Krishna mantra. We don't have access to that in our impure state. So we should chant Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda's names. They are the planetary expansion of Krishna, they are the incarnation of Krishna for this age. They came to give love of God in the chanting of the holy names through the Sankirtan movement. So if we chant Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo, Lord Chaitanya Nityananda, Chaitanya Nityananda, Chaitanya Nityananda, Nityananda Chaitanya, Nityananda Chaitanya, Chaitanya Nityananda, Nityananda Chaitanya, then we will have access to the Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then we will experience transcendental bliss. So it requires to clear the tuning fork, which is the body, make sure the chakras are open, and then then you can chant in a pure state of mind. But if your body is filled with so much polluted things, so many bad memories, so much repressed anger, so much envy, jealousy, resentment, you can't chant properly, and you won't feel ecstasy, which will open you up to the 14-dimensional space. The human body is uniquely qualified to make spiritual advancement because it is in between these spaces. It is both gross and subtle. We have a physical body, but we have a mind, intelligence, and ego. There are some forms of animal life that don't really have a mind, right? They just work on quote-unquote instinct, which is that they're in a physical being and the super soul directs their steps and they're trapped. They must just play out their karma. But we have a choice. We can choose. We have self-agency, so-called free will, to direct our desires. Right? We point our consciousness towards what we want, and then we make sacrifices and endeavor. The more we fix our mind on that object of our desire, the more energy Krishna gives us to pursue it. If we pursue him, if we fix our mind on the Supreme Person, whom all energies emanate from, then we get everything automatically. We get the full pie and we get to eat it. But if we focus on something grossly material, like another body, a sports car, space stations, whatever you want, rockets to the moon, then Krishna will give you the energy until you become so exhausted. You lose all your money, you do everything, and you're like, this was a total fool's errand. Why did I do this? Well, because material exhaustion breeds spiritual seeking. So as soon as we exhaust ourselves materially, then we're going to say, what now? I've played with these 7 lower planetary systems to my heart's content. Now what's the 7 upper? Okay, now let's get into the mind, intelligence, and false ego. Okay, now what's beyond that? Okay, we have Atma, which is soul. Okay, what's beyond that? Well, you have super soul. Okay, so if I can access my soul and surrender my soul to the topmost person, rather than surrender my soul to men of demoniac nature so they can exploit me, maybe then I'll be happy. Yeah, that sounds right. So if we do it like that, then we are happy. And the more we surrender everything we have and realize that it's not our energy anyways, but it was given to us to be used in service to him, then the more we give back to him, the more happy we become. And we don't lament over people that die, whether our son commits suicide, or whether our wife dies, whatever it is. We won't lament if we know that we are not this body. But we can't falsely renounce this body either. If we're still on the bodily platform, if we still aren't conscious of the different levels and layers of our being, then to falsely renounce out of it will cause more pain and suffering. And this is nearly every spiritual person in this world that I have met, and I've met a lot of so-called exalted personalities. They're all on the bodily platform because they have not confronted the dark nature of their own being. So in order, 7 higher and 7 lower planetary systems, good and evil, light and dark, hot and cold. These are dualities, right? But they're material dualities. And so as soon as we see that they are only separated by degrees and that it's all one large spectrum of energy, then we can transcend it and enjoy the full blessings of immortality and not be afraid to confront evil or to go into those dark places. If we're afraid to go anywhere, then we have not transcended the bodily concepts. If there are still things that make us cry, we have not fully transcended them, like in the negative sense, right? If we're still, like if we have a loved one who died and every time their name is brought up, it makes us cry, we haven't transcended the body. Now, a materialist who hears this stuff, they go, man, this person's psychotic. They have no empathy. No, that's not it at all. We should be very compassionate to the plight of the living entity while not being attached to them. If the moment we become attached, we fall down into hellish life. Because then we start pursuing things to fill that hole that we perceive within ourselves, rather than understanding, why do we feel this void? Why? Why does every time I take in another piece of sense gratification, do I feel satiated for a short amount of time, but then inevitably I fall back into a depressive mood? High functioning depression is a legitimate thing, right? Why is that? Well, it's because nothing in this 4-dimensional material space will make us happy. It will only give us temporary material comfort. That's it. There is a space, eternal time, right? We live in linear time. You desire something, you strive for it, you fulfill that desire, then you have to desire something else. Then what? Then you go another summit. And there's an endless linear time. Goes forever. Until we say, no more desires. I'm going to try to please the Supreme Person, and I know by pleasing Him from whom all energies emanated, I will be happy. And by doing that, everyone becomes happy. Everybody chants the Lord's holy names. This world becomes non-different from the spiritual world. Boom, like that. It's that easy, right? It's that easy. But this world has rejected Krishna and His Son. So they need to be chastised into submission. That's the book of Revelation. We're at the first horse of the apocalypse in the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation 6:2 says, a rider on a white horse will be given a crown and a bow, sent out conquering to conquer. Now, coronavirus translates to crown. The virus, like a bowman, a rider on a white horse given a crown and a bow. The virus, like a bowman, targets the head and chest. The coronavirus has conquered essentially the whole world, right? It's a crown virus. So somebody who wins a battle, they ride a white horse and they conquer out. So a lot of people are coming to their spiritual senses. They're getting their spiritual crown. And so in that way, it is a crown disease for them in a positive way. But then a lot of people are surrendering, a white horse, white flag surrendering to material masters. So we're seeing this, and this was predicted by Lord Chaitanya, the incarnation of God for this age. We're seeing the bifurcation of society. Like this. And the rate is logarithmic. There is, I love this so much. When I was in filmmaking, there's something called the inverse square law in regards to light. So every half distance you get closer to a luminous object, it becomes 4 times brighter. So if you're 16 feet away and you get 8 feet closer, it becomes 4 times brighter. But then half that distance, only 4 feet, it becomes 4 times brighter. So now we're 16 times brighter, and then half that distance, 2 feet, 64 times, or, exponentially brighter and brighter and brighter, right? I don't know the math exactly, but you get the idea. And so the bifurcation of society that we're seeing right now, where the people are turning to spiritual life and the people are turning to deeper into their materiality, is like this. And it's going to go, it's just going to shoot out like that super fast. What's the second horse of the apocalypse? Revelation 6:4. A rider on a red horse, given a sword, sent to take peace from the earth so that they will kill one another. That's World War III. It's right around the corner, people. Nobody understands it. But Srila Prabhupada, who wrote Bhagavad Gītā as it is, he was in eternal time. There was no linear desire with him. He had overcome that. And so he could see past, present, and future simultaneously. And he said World War III would start because the Chinese will eat anything. Now this is twofold. Well, you have the coronavirus, which came out of a wet meat market, showing that the Chinese will eat anything. But also, cannibalism is a very real thing, and although we don't hear about it, it happens. Of course it happens. Anything to the contrary is a half-truth. It's very satanic. But this is how certain men of power retain their power, is through the slaughtering of infants, sacrificial slaughter. It's a fact, it happens. And Prabhupada said the war would begin between India and Pakistan, and then it would happen between China and Russia and the US. Well, look at what's happening right now. China and the US are in a trade war, capital war, economic war, infrastructure war. It's just not a hot war yet, but we're moments away from that. Who knows how long away we are exactly, but there are Chinese troops along our northern border. I'm in the US right now. There's a naval fleet outside the West right now. Our Pacific fleet is there. It's like everything's being positioned for this, global reset. It's all being orchestrated. And Prabhupada said preaching would be good after the war. So as these two people begin to bifurcate, you have the materialists and then you have the people striving for spiritual life. It looks like a flower. It's like a lotus because it's all encompassing. And then it also says in the Bible, Satan expels Satan. So these materialists, they'll go deeper and deeper into their trying to please their senses through all kinds of crazy stuff. They'll be eating people. They'll be taking the mark of the beast, whether that's chip, transhumanism, all this stuff, right? They're just going to go for it. They're going to try to please their senses however they can, their material senses. Then you have the spiritualists who are going to be making sacrifices, trying to pull some of those people back into the fold. Come here, come here. Don't go down. Don't walk into the dark cave. But they're going to keep going. And the only sacrifice recommended in this day and age is the Sankirtan sacrifice, which is congregational chanting of the holy names, food distribution, literature distribution, right? That's it. Because if we can give people the absolute truth, give them food that is non-different from God, give them the mantra that is non-different from God, this world turns into the spiritual world. It only takes, it can happen so quickly. So I got a little off tangent from what I was originally going to talk about, which is the body. But I think I enjoyed the rabbit hole we went down. So thank you very much for spending this hour or so with me. I'm very grateful that I've gotten your association for the short amount of time we've been together. Please leave comments in the section below of what you would like me to speak on in the future. I'd be happy to go anywhere that you desire and connect it back to the absolute truth. Okay, well, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.